Welcome and thank you for being here for another Black History Month day in weather history. We are looking today back to the year 1945 and the Tuskegee Airmen in World War II. Hi there, I'm Chris May, host of This Day in Weather History, a podcast from the Weather Network in Canada. Many people are familiar with the Tuskegee Airmen of World War II. We've read about them in history. But did you know about that Tuskegee Weather Detachment? It played a role in producing the first black meteorologists, and it's all part of this Black History Month moment in weather history. The Tuskegee Airmen were the first black military pilots in what was called the U.S. Army Air Corps, the AAC, which would later merge into what we know today as the globally celebrated U.S. Air Force. This group were incredibly talented, and their accomplishments earned them more than 150 distinguished flying crosses awarded to anyone who goes on to distinguish themselves by any single acts of heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in flight. So for 150 of these among this group is truly remarkable, and I think sets the scene, tells the whole story. But for all their recognized individual success, they were likely most proud of what they, as a whole sum of their parts, meant to the cause of segregation and integration, because they played a top role in helping encourage that eventual integration of the United States Armed Forces. However, in a story from Air Power History magazine, only 62 qualified weather forecasters were registered with the Army in July of 1940. That was not a lot by any standards. But then again, this field was still coming into its own. Problem is, plans were already underway to expand the Air Corps into the Army Air Forces, which effectively would be that merger to later be called the U.S. Air Force. It would require as many as 10,000 to 20,000 weather personnel. 62 was a long way from that. Among the notable Tuskegee weathermen included the following: Wallace Reed, who started in 1941 and was selected as the first black cadet. Reed was also the first black weather officer for the Air Corps Weather Service. Charles Anderson. He's understood in history to have been the first black American to earn a doctorate in meteorology at the prestigious MIT. And Robert Preer, who was the first black American to enter a desegregated United States Air Force. The Tuskegee Weathermen were pioneers in both the American Armed Forces as well as the civilian world, and they laid the foundation for endless new opportunities for the generations who would come after them. Their impact continues to be felt and recognized today. As a matter of fact, in this current day and age, and I quote, "Federal law mandates that jobs and military service opportunities remain available to all Americans, regardless of gender, race, or creed." It is often to take these freedoms for granted. However, this has not always been the case. Hey, just a reminder that today's episode is accompanied by a podcast video short. You can watch this 2-minute version of today's story on television on the Weather Network in Canada or online anywhere you are at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio and include photos and video from today's Black History Month episode. After you listen to the rest of this episode, be sure to check it out. It's the podcast video short. Before the American involvement in World War II, segregation in America prevented black Americans from serving within the military, especially in what was then known as the Army Air Corps. The Army Air Corps included crew that were responsible for meteorological observations and forecasting, and the data that the meteorological crew gathered was transmitted to the pilots. In 1939, the civilian pilot training program was developed in order to gather more interest in aviation throughout America. And then on March 22nd of 1941, the 99th Pursuit Squadron was activated at Chanute Field, Illinois, and was made up of black Army troops as well as other enlistees, including 5 black weather observers. And with that, on March 21st of 1942, the Tuskegee Weather Detachment was formed. And even though small-minded, self-conscious cowards within the AAF continued to push to, quote, segregate, training, and restrict black Americans to positions purely meant for supporting flying units rather than positions that required skill, end quote, our highly skilled weather officers that had completed their necessary upper-level mathematical coursework were absolutely needed, and a number of Black Americans successfully met those achievements. Tomorrow is February the 12th, and we are looking back to an almost deadly event that unfolded during the 2006 Yukon quest. Its founder envisioned, and I quote, "a race so rugged that only purists would participate." Well, humans are still humans, and Mother Nature wins every time when she wants to, so something tells me that this is going to come with a lot of mind twists and stomach turns. Can't wait till tomorrow. Here on This Day in Weather History, I'll be here, your host, Chris May.